Okay, good afternoon. I'm Skip Vaughn, GSA Project Manager for the Department of Commerce renovation project. I've only been on the project for about a year, so everything that was put into the design I can't take any credit for. Okay, here's a picture that's in one of the handouts that was left up front. That, you know, whenever people want to ask about, well, what do you have for flooding in DC? I think this is a classic picture. And this is in the Federal Triangle. So what I want to do with this slide is open up a little bit with about some of the other projects GSA is doing in the DC area, specifically the Federal Triangle, in relationship to the 2006 flood. Unfortunately, the two buildings that got hit worst in 2006, Department of Justice and the IRS building, Justice had already been completed prior to that. IRS was either just finishing or right after it was finished. It was right near the finish point when the floods hit. So both of those projects had no opportunity whatsoever to have any lessons learned from the 2006 flood integrated into the project. With the Department of Commerce project, they did have a slight bit of chance. The design went from 2004 to 2007. The reports from 2006 flood came out about the same time the design was finished, so there wasn't actually a chance to integrate, you know, the final findings from the reports, but lessons learned, you know, spontaneously from the event were able to get one major change integrated into the design that we'll get to in just a second here. So background. Two areas in the basement have a long history of flooding at the Department of Commerce. The first one is in the chiller plant down in the sub-basement level near the south end of the building, and the second one is a 42,000 square foot office area at the northern end of the building. The 2006 flood, there was also some problems with flooding into the basement areas from the GSA steam tunnels. So corrective measures. This is one where we were able to take some of the lessons learned immediately midstream and integrate them into the design because they weren't part of the original design scope. Relocating of the chiller plant to a higher elevation. As I showed in the previous slide, the chiller plant was in the sub-basement level. It was raised up to the basement level. Like, well, it's still the basement level, but yeah, it's another 15 to 18 feet of elevation to try and save you from floodwaters. That wasn't one of the lessons learned change. The lessons learned change was that in the new location, crystalline waterproofing, cementitious waterproofing is being installed 4 feet up the walls in the new chiller plant, which essentially is going to turn it into a bathtub. And also outside the space are watertight doors that will keep any waters either from a ruptured chiller line from getting into the occupied areas or from floodwaters getting in.
I didn't quite understand. You said lessons learned. You couldn't have lessons learned from the DOJ building or the IRS building, or were things under construction?
The Department of Justice major renovation project is already done. It was done and complete. In the IRS building, it was either just finishing or it had just finished.
Yeah, I didn't understand.
Yeah, because I mean, multi-year projects were, but the multi-year projects were done. So I think that they were like in punch list stage at the IRS for the full building renovation project when this event happened.
And did you have anything that addressed flooding in that with those renovations? Because I mean, why would one learn from that?
The lessons learned that came out from those two projects were very extensive. If you read the NCPC report on flooding in the Federal Triangle with the GSA buildings, that there was a very lengthy list of suggestions that were made for future improvements for Department of Justice and IRS. The findings were very minimal for the Department of Commerce. So basically, I'm trying to basically contrast that those projects didn't suffer a massive recent flooding event prior to construction to integrate some design flow changes as it was going on.
Okay.
Whereas with the Department of Commerce, we were able to address some things because, I mean, we were still in design, but we were just finishing design. So we were able to integrate some stuff, but, you know, if it was a couple years later, there probably would have been additional steps integrated as well.
So these were pre-existing, all these are pre-existing buildings?
Yes, early 1930s construction.
And the Commerce one had no, hadn't been started, the project, is that what you're saying? It was under
Correct.
design
It was,
still?
the design was finished in 2007. So you're 75% through design when the flooding event occurred in 2006. So the way the funding and everything works out, trying to then add design work at the end gets tricky. But some things we're able to get done. Another item is because with the old location, because it was one of the flood areas in the building, the new space is being built rather than at the sub-basement level. Basically, columns are being built up, and the new space from the old chiller plant location is going to be at the basement level. So where you did have leaking into the sub-basement level, you don't have to worry about it causing problems to any occupied spaces or utility spaces because of the fact that it's no longer being used for that type of function. It's basically void space now. So a little bit about the layout. The real big gray square here is the chiller plant, and then off to the right-hand side of the slide is where we're showing 3 watertight doors. So big gray square for the main chiller plant, that's where we have the crystalline waterproofing, 4 feet up the walls. All those existing window locations have all been bricked in. And then the mechanical room that is also to the right of the chiller plant, that also has a crystalline waterproofing all the way around and 4 feet up. And basically those 2 spaces taken together are essentially referred to as a major bathtub, where at the top of the slide there, you'll see where we have the massive 10-foot by 12-foot hinged waterproof door like you find on an aircraft carrier, and then the sliding doors, 2 double door sliding doors at 2 locations in the adjacent mechanical pump room. Some other corrective measures with the Floor A office space, which was the one major office space that had a history of not significant flooding, but minor flooding episodes throughout the previous 30 years. That space was part of the first space renovated as part of the project at Commerce. The floors had the cracks sealed, crystalline waterproofing was applied throughout the space, and new sump pumps were installed in the space tying into the under slab drainage system. One of the things we had happen though recently was September 6th, after we had the earthquake and a couple of hurricanes. One of the things with this area was the water table was risen, everything was completely saturated. So even though no single event was a 100-year storm, the cumulative effect over 3 weeks created such a massive water pressure buildup that we had water actually working through 2 feet thick of concrete and coming up through this slab. Water pressure buildup. Steam tunnel access I mentioned earlier, where we had some flooding waters getting in through the steam tunnels. Those are handled by a separate part of GSA, HODA, with running the steam plant, and so those doors would be addressed by them, not as part of the capital projects division. The electrical equipment enclosure, this is one of the things I think was the one of the best steps that was taken in the design process for the Commerce project. You know, as was said during the Corps of Engineers presentation, that, you know, in the Midwest, one of the things that's happening is taking utilities from the basement areas, bringing them up above grade and doing add-ons to houses. for the main electrical plant at Commerce, did something kind of similar. We took all the emergency power, all the main switchboards, transfer switches, everything else, built them into new structures above a first floor structure. So on floors 2 through 4 is where we built our entire new electrical equipment enclosure to make sure that we are well above any type of floodplains that may ever develop. And wanted to give you a cross-section of the size of the electrical equipment enclosure. On the top left-hand slide, the space just to the right and below the Triple E is the chiller plant that you saw on an earlier slide. And then the other side of the Triple E is going to be the future location for the National Aquarium, which is still being, is just kicking off design work right now for being relocated in the building. And there's Department of Commerce, and that's it. Thank you.